Aromagees Botanica, a metaphysical store for mind, body, and spirit. Oils, herbs, candles, crystals, teas, handmade soaps, tarot cards, everything you need on your magical journey. Daily psychic and tarot readings, classes, witchcraft, pagan, and hoodoo supplies, most of it made in-house. Try our free Dress Your Own candle station. From spiritual gifts to ritual supplies to religious books, we have the widest selection of metaphysical products in all of Tennessee since 1999. It is our goal to inspire everyone to explore their spirituality in their own way by offering information and products in a nurturing multicultural environment. Open 7 days a week. 223 Donaldson Pike, Nashville, Tennessee, or visit us online at aromagees.com.
A hand-carved natural quartz crystal ball made into a necklace for divination on the go. Crystal balls have been used for centuries in healing and cleansing rituals, as well as for divination. The sphere represents infinity and the circle of life. While a wand uses focused energy, the crystal ball sends out energy in all directions. This makes it a great resource for discovering the complete circumstances surrounding a question.
Sarah had been trying to write a book for ages, but she was still on page 1. Until she discovered SpeakYourOwnBook.com. Sarah teamed up with one of our trained writing coaches, who listened to Sarah's book idea, asked the right questions, and guided Sarah every step of the way. In 90 minutes, they had written the outline for Sarah's entire book. Within weeks, using the speak writing method, Sarah became a published author, both online and in print. Whether it's a textbook, an autobiography, a novel, or a children's book, SpeakYourOwnBook.com can help.
Yeah!
Visit our website today to download our free 50-question guide and schedule your free consultation. With Speak Writing, anyone can publish a book. Speak your own book today. You speak, we write.
You're watching Speak Your Own Book, the TV show, on Pagan World TV. Please welcome your host, Krys Copeland, head writing coach and co-founder of Speak Your Own Book.
Hi, this is Krys Copeland with Speak Your Own Book. I am today's host, and I am also a writing coach with Speak Your Own Book. And today for the holiday season, I'm recording this during the middle between Yule and between the secular New Year. And I wanted to do a show where I didn't have to bring on a guest during this busy season and take them away from their family time and their travel. We do have a lot more pagan guests lined up in January, but today I will be speaking on a topic that I am knowledgeable about within the pagan community. And that topic is a discussion guide for queer pagans and our allies for 2023, 10 questions for pagans to ask and answer. So let's talk a little bit about why I think this discussion is needed right now. Actually, we probably needed this discussion about 10 years ago in the pagan community. There has been an influx of people into the pagan faith that are spouting very non-pagan ideas, such as homophobia, transphobia, racism, and sexism, among other forms of discrimination. So let me be clear. There is no place in the pagan community for discrimination or prejudice in any form. Let me be even clearer. This means that we should never tolerate someone else's intolerance for the sake of tolerance. We should never tolerate people's hatred just to show tolerance. We should abhor those who spout these horrible anti-human ideals and remove them from our community until such time as they can treat everyone with the same level of respect, regardless of their gender, sexual identity, race, cultural heritage, ethnicity, etc. Now, there are some pagans who are realizing our own prejudices and actively working on removing them from our lives. I have these as well. All of us have these biases. It's part of being born into a world run by humans. We are fallible creatures who create fallible societies that marginalize those who don't look like us, don't think like us, or dress like us. Those of us who are actively working on reducing and minimizing and eliminating our prejudices should be supported and should support each other on this journey of self-discovery and universal truth. Now, I am one of those pagans in many ways, and I can provide my thoughts as a member of a marginalized pagan community, queerness. However, I can't speak for other marginalized pagan communities. Today, I can only focus on queerness, but I do believe that we should be giving a platform to those members of the other marginalized pagan communities so that they can share their voice too. Now, one quick disclaimer before I continue. These are my opinions. They're based on my own experience, my studies, my self-reflection, and my knowledge of other queer pagans' experiences within our community. However, they're not the only opinions out there. You'll probably find other pagan queer people who have different opinions or differ on the details of our opinions. And that's okay. You should listen to their voices just as much as you should listen to mine. Every voice should have a platform. So let's talk about what is queerness, question number one. This is a fairly simple one for me to answer because it varies for every queer person, but a generic explanation of queerness is having a gender or sexual identity that is not cis or heteronormative. What do I mean by cis or heteronormative? Cis means that you are born into a body that is reflective of your mind's gender. Hetero, of course, means being attracted to the opposite or binary opposite sex. Now, we can get into a little bit more discussion on what those labels mean, but I do want to stress that we need to stop calling these labels. These aren't labels, these are communities, and language is important. We'll just touch on that more about language being important, especially when it comes to queerness later on in our show today. Now, I can personally define my own communities subjectively as follows. First, I claim pansexuality as one of my communities, which means I am attracted to people in ways that are not based on gender. I can be attracted to someone's intelligence, someone's honesty, someone's kindness. There are lots of things outside of gender that someone can be attracted to. Humor, a sense of humor, maybe their ethics. There are lots of things that make people attractive that have nothing to do with what's between their legs. Now, I want to contrast that with bisexuality because I do also feel that in some ways bisexuality also is a community that I belong to. Because this one means that you are attracted to multiple genders. Some people like to argue that bi means that you're only attracted to two genders, male or female, and it does not actually include non-binary or trans people. in that category. However, I disagree on that, and most of my bisexual friends disagree on that. They are attracted to multiple genders and they like those genders. That means that they find trans people attractive. They find non-binary people attractive. They find cis people attractive. They find feminism attractive, masculinity attractive, and androgyny attractive. I find all of those things incredibly attractive too. However, my way of keeping my interest in a relationship has to do much more with the person's internal self than their external features. Now, I also claim a community of ethically polyamorous. This is also called ethical non-monogamy, but I don't use non-monogamy as a term for myself very often because I don't like to identify myself with what I am not, non or not monogamous, but instead of what I am, which is poly-loving or polyamorous. I have the ability to form multiple connections of various levels of romantic, platonic, and sexual connection with multiple people at the same time or separately. I have a nesting partner and I occasionally date other people, mostly people who come in and out of my life for shorter periods of time, but whose company and connection I appreciate and remember fondly. And there's never been a person that I have been in love with that I've ever fallen out of love with. I still have love for them even after the relationship has ended. These relationships also tend to end in very loving ways, such as one or the other of us moving to follow our happiness or changing the commitments in our life to respect that same happiness. So I find that polyamory works well for me because I can have the types of relationships that I want without all the negativity that I found when I tried monogamy. I also describe myself as demi-romantic. This means that while I can be friends with quite a few different people from various walks of life, I've only had true romantic feelings for a small number of people. So polyamory doesn't mean that I'm swinging by any means. I'm actually have a very limited number of partners at any one time, especially sexually. Now, for a third question, what does role and now I do want to, before we go into the third question, let me go back to the communities very quickly and touch on this. These are my communities. These are the ways I describe my communities, but they're not the only ways to describe these communities. And there are multiple other communities out there that I could touch on here, but since I'm not a member of those communities, I think it's better for you to find that information. If you want to know what asexuality means, for example, in detail, or aromanticism means in detail, Google those terms. There's plenty of people from those subcommunities that have given lots of wonderful information about it. Now, question 3. What role do sex and sexuality play in queerness? Well, sex and sexuality are part of a larger picture of queerness, which is centered around love. Homophobes have a tendency to reduce us to sexual freaks seeking out what they consider abominable acts of fornication. But just like most relationships, sex is a small piece of a relationship. As much of the time of a healthy relationship is often spent on enjoying the non-sexual company of our partners. Now, while of course a healthy relationship often includes sex or romantic time, there are many healthy relationships in which sex is not a part of it in any way. Some partners may be asexual or aromantic, but still enjoy other forms of intimacy with their partners, such as cuddling, holding hands, or good conversations. And the best relationships probably include those 3 activities much more so than sex. So certainly sex can and even usually is part of a person's queerness, but it can also certainly not be a requirement to be queer. Now, let's move on to question 4. What role does gender play in queerness? Gender can play a lot into queerness, both on the sexuality side, regarding what types of genders we are attracted to, as well as the gender side, which type of gender do we identify as? Those who experience gender dysphoria may include people who are transgender as well as people who are non-binary. Now, gender dysphoria is this feeling of your mind not matching your body parts, that your body is not the same as your mind in regards to gender. Now, since it is much easier for modern medicine to change a person's body to reflect their mind. And we've also found it to be incredibly damaging to try to change a person's mind to reflect their body, as seen in the horrific mental health outcomes of sending children to conversion camps, choosing which parts of an intersex baby to chop off based on not much more than flipping a coin or the parent's choice, and the forced conformity to wearing clothes that reflect a person's genitals rather than their mind. All of these add up to the absolute scientific fact that people with gender dysphoria should be able to change their bodies to match their mind and not be forced to change their mind to match their body. Now, non-binary people. These are people who feel they don't completely belong to the male or female category of sex or the masc-fem categories of gender. While intersex people, meaning people who are born both with male genitalia and female genitalia, are often non-binary. And logically so, there are many non-binary folks that simply do not feel they were assigned the correct gender at birth, but also don't feel that the opposite gender really fits them either. I'll expand a little bit more on this question later in a later question, but neither gender nor sex is binary. So let's jump into the question number 5, and we'll start touching on this a little more. 5, what is gender? Gender is a social norm that in the past was only divided into 2 possible categories in the recent past, male or female, the same as the original categories for sex in biology. These are very much based on Christo-Judaic beliefs and have no place in modern paganism. Not only has science very clearly shown that gender and sex are both on a spectrum, there is also clear evidence in pagan mythology and in historical practices of ancient pagans that multiple genders were in fact respected by our ancestors prior to Christianity's world takeover. Now, many of you are already familiar with the twin souls concept from Native American cultures. Hawaiian culture also discusses 4 genders, boy, 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 girl, boy, girl, girl, clearly indicating that sex and gender are not always the same, even for historical, ancient pagan traditions. Now, question 6 goes to the other side of that. What is sex? Sex is a biological term that in the recent past was also considered to have 2 possible biological results, male or female. Again, this was based on outdated Christo-Judaic beliefs and has no place in modern paganism at all. In the past 50 years, biology has come to discover that 1, intersex people exist, and 2, sex and gender are influenced by at least 6 different genes, creating a myriad of potential sexes a human being might have. Now, what representation does the queer community have in pagan religions? Why is it so important to respect and honor the queer community within pagan religions? Let's talk a little bit about this. First, as many of our converts, so to speak, to paganism come from Christianity and Christian backgrounds, many of them are also persecuted for various aspects of themselves that are not in alignment with fundamental Christianity, as I prefer to call this type of Christianity, which is so misguided and so damaging and so cult-like. These are very misinformed and very wrong interpretations of the human condition. This includes the national X-Gen movement, both seen in the United States as well as growing rapidly in other countries around the world. This is something that we must lovingly combat, peacefully combat as pagans. Now, this also these converts that came over include queer people who were born into fundamentalist X-Gen movements, such as myself, but have escaped this cult. And I'll call it exactly what it is. It is a cult. Members are required to never question their leaders, never question their texts, never question the Holy Scripture, but hand over their money to them without any accountability for their leaders. This is the very definition of a cult. Pagan leaders can and should have accountability, and many of them take this accountability seriously and serve their communities faithfully without corruption. As a Corellian, I know that that is part of our Corellian beliefs as well. We have a very open community and our leaders in that community are faithful and giving servants. However, there are other former X-Gens infiltrating our community in an attempt to stir up chaos, instill fundamentalist X-Gen nonsense into our minds, and convert our membership to their own corrupt leadership. We must be vigilant in order to protect those former ex-gens escaping these cults, as well as members of our faith who are naiver and perhaps more susceptible to this brainwashing, such as those who struggle with mental illness or intellectual disabilities. Now, the percent of queer pagans are not low by any measure of statistics. We represent about 47% of all pagans, almost 1 in 2. That's a large minority. We are quickly going to become the majority in pagan religion as more cishet claiming pagans suddenly come to realize that they are perhaps part of our queer community. Our rights should be respected and honored, even if we numbered just one queer person in the pagan community. But generally speaking, half of us are queer, and we have the ability to secure our rights, especially with the overwhelming percentage of cishet allies joining our cause in the pagan community. Now, the percent of discriminatory people claiming paganism falsely in our community is quite small by comparison. But just like their tiny representation in many faiths around the world, Christianity, Islam, others, these are generally ones who scream the loudest, start the most drama, and cause the most chaos to harm our community. So we must be vigilant against them. Now, what stance does or should the pagan community take on queer rights? Right now, there doesn't seem to be a stance that most pagan communities are taking on queer rights. And I would love to see more pagan communities taking a stance. Now, as far as what we should be doing regarding queer rights, what our stance should be with queer rights, that's a no-brainer. All human beings deserve the same rights. Love is love. There are multiple examples of various sexualities and genders in pagan mythology, and the universe, or the god and goddess, if you prefer, revels in love and joy and sex of all kinds, as long as they are between or among consenting adults. We should all, queer or cishet, work together to preserve the rights of queer pagans and other marginalized groups in the pagan community. This also includes protecting queer pagans from false pagans who seek to harm queer folk or other marginalized members of our community. This isn't up for discussion. This isn't something that should be at all controversial in our community. There is no other acceptable point of view, period. Now, question 9. What queer subgroups are most at risk today? The queer subgroup most at risk today is our trans siblings. Let's talk numbers, like real hard data here. Trans people are 450% more likely to be victims of a violent crime than cis people. The number of hate crimes against trans people have increased by more than 50% in recent years. The risk for suicide attempts in the trans community is 43%. And it's largely driven by bullying and hate speech targeting their community and the trans victims in particular. In order to show queer and especially trans pagans that they are safe within our community, we can do several things. First one is most obvious. Post a rainbow and or trans flag on your social media pages for your shrines, your covens, your temples, your clans, etc. If pagan queers begin joining your celebrations, make sure that they are safe coming to and from the event. Offer to walk or ride with them or start a buddy system. And this should really be done for all new members of queerance anyway, but it's especially important for queer pagans to feel welcome, as these are the ones most likely to feel unwelcome. In addition, hold queer rituals. Honor queer deities such as Hermaphrodite, Artemis, Achilles, Zeus, Pan, Dionysus, Isis, Seth, Nephthys, Hapi, Shiva, Parvati, Vishnu, Krishna, Odin, Loki, and Wakaniomo, among many countless others. This is a clearly established part of all, or at least most, pagan mythologies. Queerness is perfectly acceptable. Another thing that you can do, provide life passage ceremonies to all queer folk, regardless of their religious background, and incorporate their personal religious and spiritual beliefs into the ceremony. Sometimes queer folks do not have access to these services through their own religion, and officiants for queer weddings are in desperately short supply around the world. So if you can offer those services as a pagan minister, please do so. Another thing you can do is check in on your queer members often. Make sure they feel welcome and included in your community, and ask queer members for other ways to honor their queerness and paganism. Now, our last question for today's episode: what steps can we lovingly take to educate other members of our community? So, most non queer pagans are good, honest, kind, and loving people, but they may not be educated on the various terms and changes in language that are going on in the queer community. In addition, you may have newly queer people, people who have just come out in the closet, or maybe they're curious and they want to understand more about queerness before accepting that as a one of their own communities. These people may accidentally call someone the wrong gender, or they may not have correct scientific information on queerness. And it's our responsibility, as long as these pagans, whether they're queer or non-queer, are seeking to learn and become more inclusive, we should, as queer pagans, return their curiosity and eagerness to be kind with kindness and correct good information. This may mean dealing with annoying questions with answers that appear obvious to us, or even far too personal questions. So let's break down those two types of questions. If it's a personal question, maybe a non-queer pagan asks you an incredibly personal question that they wouldn't have asked a cishet person. You can simply point that out with, I want to help you understand the queer community and grow in your journey of kindness. But I also want to be honest that it makes me incredibly uncomfortable for you to ask this question about my genitals, about my sex life, about my attraction to specific people, maybe even to the person you're talking to. That's a common one we get is, do you think I'm attractive? I would like to kindly challenge that question with two of my own. Would you ask such a personal question to a cishet pagan sibling? And if you would like to learn more about those particular aspects of queerness from an individual who is willing to share this information with the world, I can recommend several autobiographies and memoirs of queer authors. Would you like them? So that's a good, quick way of, neutralizing the too personal question, as well as providing them with information where they can get that answered without it being personal for you. Another question that I get that I'm often happy to answer for both from a queer POV and the POV of an English teacher. Why all this fuss over pronouns? If someone looks like a woman, my brain will just use she, her. If someone looks like a man, my brain will just use he, him. And they can't be singular. My English teacher said they is never singular. So, okay, I have 2 points to make on this. One, no one, not a single human being on this earth, cis, trans, non-binary, owes anyone a certain presentation of masculinity, femininity, or androgyny. Lipstick and dresses do not define a woman. Sports and cars do not define a man. And wearing dresses while playing sports does not define a non-binary person. So call people what they want to be called. If you make a mistake and say the wrong pronoun, apologize. Thank the person for the correction and then move on quickly. Do not ever over apologize or drag the situation into the territory of embarrassment for the queer person. Secondly, your English teacher who taught you that they can't be singular probably taught you that prior to 2010-ish, and language evolves. Even historically, they and them have been used in the singular form to describe someone of unknown gender for centuries. An example might be a conversation between two people who are sitting at home together. They are dating or married. One person says, "Honey, someone's on the phone for you." The other person says, "Who is it?" And the first person says, "I'm not sure if they're a man or a woman. Do you want me to get their name?" You don't need to memorize are, have for plurals, and is, has for singulars. That role, in fact, has always been to use you, we, and they with are and have, he, she, and it with is and has, and am, have with I. There is not a rule of singularity or plurality regarding pronouns. It's just a matter of pairing certain verb forms with certain pronouns, regardless of plurality, but rather by gender, which is very common in most Romantic languages and Germanic languages. The division is along gender lines. Specific genders, he, she, it, versus unspecified or non-binary genders, I, we, they. If your English teacher told you differently, they didn't really study pronouns and historical use that closely then, and they certainly aren't able to understand English as a living, constantly evolving language. So, One final disclaimer that everything I have said is based on my own personal interpretation of my own life experiences, the experiences shared by other queer people, and my own education on the subject of queerness. Other queer people may define certain words differently or have differing opinions on the details of my opinions. But my answers aren't nearly as important as yours or the answers of other queer pagans. So let's begin this conversation in 2023 and keep it going until all queer pagans have equal rights, both within our community and within the world. I wish you a wonderful year in 2023, and blessed be.
Thank you for watching Speak Your Own Book, the TV show on Pagan World TV, hosted by head writing coach and co-founder Krys Copeland. Please join us next time on Speak Your Own Book.
Sarah had been trying to write a book for ages, but she was still on page 1 until she discovered speakyourownbook.com. Sarah teamed up with one of our trained writing coaches who listened to Sarah's book idea, asked the right questions, and guided Sarah every step of the way. In 90 minutes, they had written the outline for Sarah's entire book. Within weeks, using the speak writing method, Sarah became a published author, both online and in print. Whether it's a textbook, an autobiography, a novel, or a children's book, speakyourownbook.com can help.
Yeah.
Visit our website today to download our free 50-question guide and schedule your free consultation. With Speak Writing, anyone can publish a book. Speak your own book today. You speak, we write.